Hi, my name is Saif Muhammad, and I just graduated. Not completely though. Still have a little bit of unfinished business. Here, you know what? Before we get into that, let me tell you about who I am. Okay. I'm 18 years old, and I'm sort of a senior. I say sort of a senior because I don't know if this counts as me graduating or if I'm still a senior. But uh, either way, I've attended Little Elm High School, and I work as a fuel attendant at Wawa. During my senior year, though, I attended this one class and was called Senior Project. And basically, uh, it's a project where I, the student, get to pick a topic of my own personal choice of my choosing, and I then choose to study that throughout the year. You see, one thing you have to understand is I chose this, but not during my senior year. I chose this during my freshman year when I knew since my freshman year, I was going to be doing senior project. So I did comedy. To get in specifics, I chose stand-up comedy, and I want to talk about stand-up comedy maybe, well, I do want to talk about stand-up comedy throughout the years. Okay, to get into it though, let's get on a more personal level. This kind of feels weird. You might be focusing on this, so I'm just gonna switch hats. Okay. So, as I said, I've naturally studied comedy, but that's just because I just simply enjoyed it. And because I have been studying comedy, I've noticed some things. I've noticed that things seem to be limited throughout the years, and I think I want to get into that. But first, we need to understand some things. Comedy. Professional entertainment consisting of jokes and satirical sketches intended to make an audience laugh. That we know what comedy is or an idea of what comedy is, try to imagine the different types of comedy. I mean, because if you honestly think about it, there are so many different types of way to make a person laugh, and if the whole point of comedy is to make a person laugh, shouldn't you think that there's different types of comedy? You can find comedy in things like movies or television shows, but as I brought up earlier, we're going to specifically be talking about stand-up comedy. So, stand-up comedy, a comedic style in which a comedian performs in front of a live audience, usually directly speaking to them. Now that we know what kind of style of comedy that we're doing, stand-up, we have to go into the genres of comedy. So I'm going to provide a couple of examples of the genres, and we're going to try and understand it and prove a point. Slapstick, using physical activity to help add to your humor. Black comedy / dark comedy, a style of comedy that brings light of a subject matter that is considered taboo, subjects that are normally considered serious and painful to discuss. Comedic music, music that is comedic or humorous in nature, music that makes you laugh. Satire, comedy that holds up things that are abusive to ridicule. I only brought up 4 different types of genres that can be used on stage. So I'm going to provide examples to when things do happen. For example, a slapstick. A comedian may use physical force on oneself to emphasize his or her own joke. You know, i.e., being like a slap on the leg when you're talking about a big pal, something that the audience won't expect, but it still goes along with the joke. Dark comedy. Comedians used to bring up troubling subjects to make fun of them, to see the dark in life and bring some light into it. Comedic music. This sort of genre is self-explained, so I'm just going to list off comedians who I feel do this style really well. For first, we have Bo Burnham in every single one of his specials, and we also have Adam Sandler, who does a lot of things in his past SNL years, but he also did a lot of comedic music in his recent comedy, 100% Fresh. Stand-up comedy satire is being used when comedians bring up points that any Joe Schmo brings up throughout their life and attempts to prove their point to the audience and trying to convince them that the point that any Joe Schmo can make up. However, as they're going into said point and trying to confuse it, the comedian just stops because they can't even attempt to prove their point because it's so incorrect. It's kind of like a bad job at convincing, but it also makes fun of the person that is trying to make said point in the past. Of those 4 genres, right? Well, this is 8, but 4 genres. There was one that I brought up that seemed a little off. Now, in explanation to it, I believe I had said that comedians used to bring up, past tense, when I was speaking on dark comedy. And I say past tense is because comedians aren't allowed to bring up dark jokes because they're considered offensive or not politically correct. Now, you may ask, what is politically correct? Politically correctness. Politically correctness is a term used to describe language, policies, or measures that are intended to avoid offense or disadvantage to members of particular groups in society. Now, you may ask, all right, yeah, it's okay. I mean, everybody should choose to be politically correct. And I agree with you, except for when you're using dark humor. You see, dark humor is something that is supposed to make fun of the non-politically correct by not being politically correct. Why is this so important? Why is it important for us to understand what it means to be politically correct and dark comedy, dark humor? You gotta understand something. Yes, it is. We all should strive to be politically correct in our daily lives. However, when it comes to comedy, when it comes to dark humor, something that is meant to bring light out of the dark, meaning something that is supposed to make you laugh over the bad things in life, the only way that you can laugh is if you bring up the bad things in life. But you can't do that if you're being politically correct. See what I'm saying? So, if I want to make you laugh, but you won't let me because you think I'm not being politically correct, but I'm joking, what's the whole point in us doing stand-up comedy? What's the point in that? I understand that, the case might be something like is very hurtful towards you. Maybe something bad happened. Maybe somebody makes a joke about cancer and God forbid you recently had somebody in your family die from cancer. Now, I understand why you may feel offended, but you have to understand that the intention of said joke wasn't to offend you, it was to help you laugh. Then you might say, oh, well, I don't care for the intention, you already hurted me. And where I or many comedians will say, well, I don't care what you expect because this is a comedy show. And if I'm going to use dark humor to make you laugh, I'm going to do it. Now, you can wonder, hey, can I still be politically correct and enjoy comedy? Yeah, I don't see why you couldn't do it in the first place. Being politically correct and enjoying comedy are 2 different things. However, maybe they might intertwine, but they shouldn't. Instead, they should pass through one another because politically correctness should be completely out the window when it comes to stand-up comedy. When it comes to something that's trying to make you laugh, it should just be free game because nothing is meant from the heart. Everything is just meant to make you laugh. Let's say you're so stubborn that you can't get over this feeling of offense, that you're offended about something that's going on. I mean, if you're at home and you're watching comedy, turn it off. It's completely fine to turn it off. Comedians won't be hurt if you turn off their comedy early because maybe they said something that you didn't like. They understand, and they understand that their comedy's not for you. There's tons of comedians out there with tons of different types of comedy. There's one for you. However, you shouldn't shut down the comedians that aren't meant for you. Canceling a comedian because they're not a comedian that's at your disposal, or because you may not enjoy that comedian, or maybe you don't like the things that they say, and to attempt to completely end their career and cancel them for everybody else in the world is the same as you only going to Domino's and then damaging other pizza joints because you only like Domino's, and it's the other pizza place's fault for not being like Domino's instead of doing their own thing. Okay, so now we're at the point where we come to understand what is comedy and how comedy should be taken. Let's get into what comedians we can watch now. Like, what comedians do fall under things that are a little dark, that have dark humor in them. Okay, let's say all the information we just said before, you never really knew before, and now you know. Maybe you want to give dark humor a second try. I'm going to go ahead and show you a couple comedians that do have dark humor and are still enjoyable, and maybe you could give them a try. And if you don't, so be it. This is where we part ways, and that's completely fine. For first, we have Russell Peters. Secondly, we have Tom Segura. We do have The Machine, or Bert Kreischer. Fourth on our list is Joe Rogan. Fifth is Jeff Dunham. And finally, sixth is Bill Burr. Now, I may put this to a close. Thank you, Mr. Abrams, for giving me the chance to talk about comedy, something that I'm very passionate about. Thank you, Fort Lindenwald, for even having this senior project class and allowing me to work so hard on something that I wanted to work on. Thank you for allowing me to put in a bunch of time into notes and things I can work on. And thank you. I greatly appreciate it.